So focusing on the sense of I, or the feeling I, is no different from um, other methods we've used, like focusing on the awareness, for example. It's simply another way of pointing ourselves away from all other things and all other objects, like the body and the thoughts, but also the sounds outside and, the itch in my back and so on, and pointing us back towards the subject that knows them all. That's what we're doing. So we could call that the I, or we could call that awareness, or we could call that knowing. So when we talk about I in our daily life, we aren't, because a lot of people, that I got the feeling people just couldn't distinguish this sense of I or me from their body and their mind or mental stuff. Yeah. But when we talk about I, like in our daily life, we aren't actually, I mean, I'd suggest you check in, but we're not really referring to the body or the mind. So when we say to someone, oh, I had a lovely weekend, oh, I had a really great holiday, it's like, what do we mean by that? We don't say that and then mean, oh, this body had a lovely holiday, or my thoughts and emotions had a lovely holiday. That's not what we're talking about. We're very clearly talking about this sense of something much deeper than that, like something that is just obviously me or obviously I, and it's so obvious that I don't ever even need to check what that is. I don't need to check it because I feel it. It's like I know that I am. So I can say I had a lovely weekend. I know I had a lovely weekend. So it's more of a sense, it's more of a feeling, not a bodily feeling, but just a sense is probably the best word. So like I said, this looking for eyes is the same as looking for the knowing or the awareness. The only difference between them is that we can very easily mistake awareness to be a possession of mine, as in it's my awareness. That's where the word awareness can sometimes trip us up, because we might say I am aware of everything. It suggests that awareness is a facet of this mysterious I still. So we still haven't really got to the bottom of who is the I. If we do that. So that's why other traditions have used different words. So we've discussed this before. So they might use words like the Tao if you're a Taoist, or you might use the word God if you're Christian or Muslim, for example. And words like Tao and God probably originated because they point to no thing that we are aware, that we know, and there is no thing that we can compare them to go, oh, the Tao is like this or God is like this. Of course, as soon as God was personified as a big bearded white bloke, then that whole tool became completely unuseful, because we're suddenly projecting God onto another person or an image of a person. But before that, there may have just been this sense that we were touching this thing called God, or we were touching this thing called the Tao. When we touched that unnameable, unspeakable, undescribable sense of something deep inside us. So the approach I'll take today is just to twist it a little bit and say that when we're turning towards this sense of being, or this sense of I, we are turning towards the subject of all knowing. Yes, so not the objects. The subject is the one that knows. Yeah, the subject is the knowing, not the objects known by it. So it's not the thoughts, it's not the body, it's not the sights, it's not the sounds, it's not the smells. They're all objects. But what is the subject that knows them all? That's what we're really inquiring, because the subject that knows them all is the same thing that I call me, or I call I. That is the subject. So I'm not even asking who is the subject, because that subtly interjects a person again. I'm asking what is the subject, and so we sort of change it slightly. So if you're not baffled enough by that, we'll just crack on. I'll send you out those notes and you can read them later or send them out in an email, and when you sit and digest them, it might make more sense. But the silence, the awareness, the knowing, the I, God, the Tao, they're all exactly the same thing. There isn't a thing. And because they are not an object, they are the thing that is without objective qualities. Let's just suck it and see. And sometimes practices are frustrating, and that can just be the nature of them sometimes. And like I said, you don't have to try and make this practice work. It's just another one we're playing with. For some people it obviously really clicks quite strongly, and for others it's just completely baffling. But that's the way it goes. We just some we take to, some we don't. So make sure you're comfortable. Let's at least get our body comfortable, because if you're trying to overthink this one, your mind is going to be struggling. And I'll just put that out there right now. There is absolutely zero headway you can make with this technique using your thoughts. You cannot and will not ever be able to think yourself to this solution. So you might as well let the mind just take a break. The thinking mind. So notice if your shoulders, face, back, tummy, notice if anywhere is holding a bit of tension or resistance, tightness. Sometimes when we struggle with a concept or an idea, there is this instantaneous tightness or resistance, can be very subtle. And see if you can just allow that to soften with your breath. So we're not doing anything for now, we're just stabilizing or grounding. If you're able or you're fine with following the breath for 5 breaths or so, just work with that. If you prefer to observe your body or sounds, then just do that. And just feel yourself establishing a sense of space, or just a sense of being. In other words, I know that I'm here. I don't have to look down at my body to know that I'm here. I don't have to look around me to know that I am here. And when I think I am here, or when I feel or sense that I'm here, I'm not going to anywhere else to check that. is just absolutely clear. There's not a question that I am here. There's no doubt at all that I am here. So let's just start with the breath. You might still be using it. If not, just locate it again. Pick it out of all the experiences present right now. And maybe notice that there's clearly the breath, which is an object of experience that we often say is my breath. Or I am breathing. But actually, our experience is that we are the knowing of the breath. The one that I call I, or that I feel is myself, is simply the knowing of the breath. Now we might get slightly tangled here and say, but I can hear the breath. I can feel the breath in my body. That's just more objective experience picked up by senses. You could say the senses are objects as well, but there is the knowing of the hearing. There is the knowing of the feeling. We're taking this extra step back. I don't have to focus on the breath or make the breath move. I can completely forget about the breath. I don't suddenly stop breathing. Or maybe I should say the breath doesn't stop breathing itself. Because when I come back to it, it's still ticking away. But behind the breath, behind the sound of the breath, behind the movement or feeling of the breath, there is simply this I that is the knowing of the breath. or knowing of the feeling, or knowing of the sound. And that knowing is what I take myself to be. I don't take myself to be hearing. I don't take myself to be feeling. I take myself to be the one that is the knowing. So you can just let that expand out to other sounds that you can hear, or other sounds that are heard and known. The sounds are obviously objects. They appear and disappear. They're not under your control. Even if you decide to shout and make a loud noise, it's impossible to know where that impulse or decision comes from. It'd be hard to say you controlled it. But behind the sound, behind the hearing of the sound, there is the I that knows it. The I knows the hearing. You could say that microphones pick up sounds or detect sounds just as efficiently as ears do. But the microphone doesn't seem to know. It doesn't know the hearing of the sound. And not as far as we're aware. But the difference with us is that our ears, or the ears, have this ability to receive sounds and interpret them just like a microphone does through a computer or whatever technology it uses. But we know the hearing. So take that step back And just rest as the knowing of the sounds. Don't confuse yourself with any other part of it. We take one more step, which is to thoughts and mental activity. So you might know that there's confusion, might know that there is some sort of struggle going on in the practice for you. You might know very obvious thoughts coming and going. They may be pleasant, unpleasant, annoying, or otherwise, but there is a knowing of all of them. And you may mistakenly say, well, I'm thinking these thoughts, I am the thinker of the thoughts, but yet we know nothing about what the next thought will be or why the next thought appears. There is very clearly the knowing of them. So the thoughts really, just like the breath, almost appear spontaneously. But behind them there is this knowing of thinking. If there was not the knowing of it, they wouldn't exist, or they wouldn't exist to anyone that knew them. So turn towards that sense of I, and the I could also be said to be the knowing, the same thing. Don't turn to the thought that's known. You're not interested in the objects. We're interested in the knowing itself. That knowing has no qualities. We can't look at it. It's only identified by the absence of other objects, such as thought. Might say it's complete silence, or a blank canvas, or an infinite spaciousness. And now from this infinite space or silence, just let the breath be known again. It might feel literally as if you stretch out somehow and reach for the breath. The breath is directly known again. And just allow the breath to slowly deepen and lengthen, become a little more active. Maybe taking the next 4 or 5 breaths up towards 5, and each breath just feeling your legs, your arms, your body with a fresh energy or life about it. Might feel some gentle movement returning back to the wrists, fingers, toes. Maybe a little stretch emerges naturally. Or a rub of the hands, a rub of the face. If you feel a little bit dreamy or sleepy still, it's always good to just rub body parts together, face, hands, legs, just to get a reconnection of where you are in space. Notice the ground or the floor underneath you. Good, and if you touch that space or that silence for even just a moment, it's quite clear. It's very different to the content of our, what we call, our daily life. There's a clear difference. It's just behind them all, if you like. It's just behind or just below all of the content, just below the surface. So that was attempt 2. I don't know if that helped in any way or didn't. You're welcome to share or you're welcome to disappear. I will try and elaborate a bit more in an email later. Oh, hold on, I'm on mute.
Relaxing down.
Yeah, good. Oh, that's
quite good.
good.
This is going to sound ridiculous, but when I was before I got into recovery, when I
Yeah.
was in active addiction and alcoholism, I used to look at my dogs and be jealous of them and think, I bet you don't have all this going on in your head, and you don't get depressed, and you don't. And it's almost the same thing, really. They just are.
I think we've all looked at animals and thought that. Yeah.
Thing, and it's like that's what it is. Yeah.
I seem to have it simple. Simple life. Eat, run around, chase things, go to bed. Not bad. Tina, is that a hand or is that a wave?
Yeah, hello.
You alright?
Yeah, it almost feels like that bit where you are almost asleep.
Yeah.
And you jump.
Yeah.
Do you know? It's just like that.
Yeah.
And you can't. You actually, when you turn to that, you can't think of anything. It's just.
Yeah.
It's nothing else.
Totally.
All I can say.
So yeah, that's it. We touch it in the practice sometimes like that, like you say. It's like, and then all of a sudden you sort of jolt out of it, and but there's no way of saying what that was because there's nothing. Would that make sense? There's nothing you could possibly say to explain what that was. No, it was a nothingness, but not a nothingness like you're in deep sleep and you got absolutely no knowledge that you're here. There's still the knowing, isn't there? But it gets a bit hard to talk about at that point.
It's enough. You know what I mean?
Yes, yeah, I know. I totally know what you mean. It's like there's nothing missing.
That's it.
Yeah, that explains it really well.
There's nothing missing, and you think, jeepers, most of the time, there's all this stuff, which I feel like I can't do without, and then all of a sudden all that stuff's gone, and there's a sudden like, oh, didn't actually need any of that stuff at all to still just be me, and that me is this spaciousness, openness, awareness, yada yada. It's very hard to talk about. Don't worry if you're still struggling. It's all part of the process. It may just click, or just say a certain word or something, and then it just clicks. Or another practice altogether has clicked with you, and you've probably touched exactly the same thing in a totally different practice. That's been described in a totally different way. Remember, we're all trying to sort of access the understanding just through our own thought processes, and everyone's thought process is different. And I know we're saying don't think about it, but there is a subtle sort of contemplating going on that gets us there, even if it's the thought of turning towards the knowing. That is initially a thought, but then once you've turned towards the knowing or the I, the thought, we can put the thought aside. It's like that decision's been made, that action has been done, the process isn't needed anymore. You can put the tool down and just rest with, the thing that like when you build a house, you don't lug the cement mix around the front room for the next 20 years. Like, you've built the house, you can just enjoy living in it. You don't need all the stuff that was used to build it. And this is similar. There will be an initial period of doing, which is turning away or turning towards the knowing, but then there can be this sort of redundancy of the knowing. There's not a perfect way to explain it. Sarah, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you.
It's all right.
Clicked.
You what?
I said thank you, it's clicked.
Oh, it clicked. Oh, cool.
I'm going to say no more.
No.
Because I don't want to confuse myself. It's clicked.
Well, there's nothing to say. That's good. I'm glad it clicked. And so I had a really good question yesterday from somebody by email, which maybe I'll talk about on Friday as well. And it was, It was this one about like it can click, you know, in the practice, and I can feel, and the more it clicks, the more it clicks. That's sort of how it works, really. Once you've touched it, you sort of know how to touch it again. Um, but then the conversation about, but as soon as I go back into the day, it disappears again. Where's it gone? So we'll talk about that on Friday. It hasn't really gone anywhere, you know, at all. It's just harder to touch it when we're busy, you know, and our thoughts are so active and so on. It's very hard to touch the silence at the same time. So yeah, that's just another step. I can't maintain that, certainly not through my whole day. There are moments through the day when I can, and then moments when it's totally gone. I don't know many people who can. But yeah, so just because we touch it in practice, it's really useful, and it's a great place to start to understand it. But yeah, don't worry that then your day feels like you fall back into turmoil again. That's just our habit pattern of a lifetime. It's like, you know, imagine we've watered those plants of distraction and thought and everything else for the last 50 years or however long we've been alive. You know, we've only been watering this one for a very short time. It's not going to suddenly grow above, show its head above all the rest of the distractions. We need to allocate more time to it. But there's no rush, you know. There's no rush. Anything else before I wrap up? No. Okay. Cool. Well, enjoy your day. We'll try again on Friday. And remember, there's no success or failure. Absolutely not. If we fall into that, then we've fallen back into thinking again. We're going backwards. So we just let the practice be what the practice is, and that's it. Like 9 times out of 10, I'll sit here and all I can do is think for 30 minutes. Very occasionally, I'll be like, "Oh, it's a little moment there," and that, you know, very occasionally.